chapter 3 in your social psych book is about basically, if you think about how we interact with one another socially, how we express ourselves emotionally, and how we deal with stress and cope are important parts of that. So I'll cover some of the most basic information first about how our body kind of detects stressors and responds to stress. Talk some about emotions, and then talk about the different types of stress and different types of coping in this short video. Let's see. So I'm sure you recall hearing about these two branches of the nervous system: the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. All of us as humans have this, that when we're faced with a threat, like a dog charging and barking at us, when something like that happens, our pupils will dilate, get really big so we can take in more information. Our heart rate will increase to get blood to the muscles so we can fight or run away. You don't need to digest food, but you'll have to release sugar and adrenaline into your bloodstream so you have the energy to, again, take on a threat. The flip side of that part of the nervous system is the parasympathetic. That's what happens, that's what's activated when we're relaxed. You don't need to take in a bunch of information, so your pupils contract, your heart rate slows, and that's when you digest food and start to store up energy and resources so that when later on you might face a threat, you can respond to that. Another part of our body's stress response is the limbic system, and one particular structure in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is our constant monitor, actually it even happens on an unconscious level, looking for threats in our environment. So if you're walking down the street, just really not even paying attention, and someone comes at you like in a threatening pose, your amygdala will alert you faster than maybe even you will consciously recognize what's going on. It is the center for fear and anger, for our expression of it, but also our detection of it. And that helps us to respond to any sort of threat. The problem with the amygdala is that, as you'll see when we get to PTSD, sometimes it can become overly sensitized to certain cues. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Another, also related, amygdala and hippocampus are all part of the limbic system, the primitive structures in the brain that are really our kind of an animal system, our emotional response to things. If you look at emotions across the globe, they've been studied in all different cultures across the whole world, and we see at least 7 basic emotions that are common to all cultures, and you see them here on the screen. I'm not going to say each one by name, but you can see they serve a function. Like in fright, that's kind of a weird expression there, but it opens up the eyes so you can take in more information. Excuse me, happiness. Excuse me, a genuine smile. Actually, a genuine smile is going to crinkle the eyes and you're going to see the teeth, and our body responds to that, and we can detect typically easily a genuine smile from a fake smile. If someone's kind of coming at us with a genuine smile, that's going to communicate to us to relax. Our amygdala will say, okay, safe. You can see also disgust in that particular expression. That pinches up the nose, so something gross smelling will stay away. And usually, a lot of times the mouth might be closed. Sometimes though, it's like you have the tongue kind of sticking out. Think about like a baby being fed like creamed spinach or something, and it goes, spits it out. It's disgusting. It's rejecting it from its sensory mechanisms in the face. If you look at how much of the brain is devoted to just our facial muscles, there's a strip in the back of the frontal lobe called the motor cortex, and our whole body is mapped out on that. And so if we start any sort of movement in our body, you can even see, I'm going to take the arrow here, down here, our toes. You have neurons activating this part of the strip of the motor cortex will say, wiggle your toes, and you can do that. But look how much of the motor cortex is devoted to the face, because this has been incredibly important for human survival, to be able to communicate non-verbally with our group, with the people that we're living with, to be able to basically communicate without necessarily having to say much, which can promote our community, our safety, our harmony, basically. So if you think about the importance of these these emotions and their facial expressions associated with them, they're critical. But they're also different across cultures. I'm not going to say everything on this particular slide here. If I think one interesting fact I have down here is that infants that are born blind have the same facial expressions as kids who are born with full sight. And so infants at about 4 to 6 weeks all start to smile at the same time. 3 to 4 months, you see anger and sadness expressed. And about 5 to 7 months, you see fear expressed in infants across the globe. But there are some differences in terms of cultural responses. Actually, more collectivist cultures, and again, the overgeneralization, but if you think of cultures like Japan and China, which I've had the good fortune to visit both of those, a lot of times if there's a strong emotion someone's experiencing, they will cover their face because they don't want to impose their emotional reaction on other people. And individualistic cultures like the US, we're like, we're just like out there with our emotions, and we're much more likely to display pride and anger than anyone in a more collectivist culture. Again, with collectivism really promoting harmony. Actually, there is a phobia in this just unique to Japan, which is this fear of really imposing your emotions on other people. Also, there's some sex differences too. Typically in individualistic cultures, and this has more to do with socialization than anything, men and women are socialized to express things. Men less likely to be socialized to express fear and sadness. But the funny thing is, when you start looking at, if you put electrodes on people's arms, their blood pressure, measure their temperature, their sweat response, men and women respond to emotional movies in bodily the same ways. But the difference in how they express it with their face is it comes from training in our society. Some components of emotion. These are 3 basic things you're going to see no matter what emotion you're talking about. You have your bodily arousal, your interpretation, your psychological appraisal of what's going on, and like then if someone says, how do you feel? What you say you're experiencing. So there's a body component, your psychological interpretation, and then how you say you feel. Those are 3 major components. But sometimes, I mean, that interpretation piece is huge. There is a famous study that was done about using interpretation and attributions. And these researchers took a lot of participants, randomly divided them into groups, and then injected half of them with epinephrine, which has the same effect as adrenaline, and told them, look, this is going to make you jittery. And they told them the truth, you're being injected with this adrenaline-like substance. And they injected the other half of the participants with adrenaline, but said, oh, this is like a vitamin pack, and so you won't have any effects at all. So the people who had been lied to didn't expect any sort of body reaction. So this was strange. What they ended up doing was they put people who'd been injected and been told what to expect, or they've been lied to, and then they had the people around them act in different ways. Some of the people acted really angry because they gave them surveys to fill out, and like some of the questions were intentionally offensive, like how many people did your mom sleep with before she had you, that kind of stuff. And the researchers set it up so that the other participants, like in that situation, would get angry at those questions, like, I'm not filling this stuff out, and they just crunched it up and threw it away and stormed out of the room. In that situation, they went to the people who'd been injected with epinephrine, were lied to, and said this won't have any really effect except to make you maybe a little itchy, and asked them how they felt. They interpreted themselves as feeling angry because they looked around their environment and saw other people being angry and upset at the questions that were being asked on the survey. So they assumed and attributed, I must be angry too. This was a famous study basically saying how we interpret our environmental situation and other people's responses and use that as information for ourselves can play a huge role in the eventual emotion that we report experiencing. Let's see, we have, I'm switching gears, it's kind of hard here. So that first part of the chapter is really about some of the emotional components of human reaction and its importance for us. And then we have this part on stressors and coping. Three major types of stressors I'll talk about: trauma, life changes, and daily hassles. Traumatic events, just what it sounds like. The three major causes of traumatic trauma, or you probably heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Post means after, post-trauma stress disorder. Usually the three most common ones are car accidents, sexual assault. Sorry, I'm forgetting the other one. Oh, combat. I have the picture of the soldiers right there. Yeah, I was like, what's the third one? And I have the four major conditions for it. You have to experience some sort of severe injury or life-threatening response, or even witness it. You have a re-experiencing of that event, either through nightmares or just like suddenly you feel like you're there, so you may dissociate and feel like you're reliving it. You avoid anything that reminds you of the trauma, and you have a huge bodily reaction. In this case, this is what I was talking about in terms of the amygdala. So if I've had a car accident when it's raining, I get behind the wheel and it looks like it might start to rain out there, I could have a full-fledged panic attack because that cue or that trigger is going to remind me of that horrible car accident I had. And so that is when the amygdala is on oversensitivity kind of mode. And it just says, oh, here's something that reminds me of that traumatic event we went through, and will send the body into a panic attack. So that's obviously really stressful for people who have PTSD. If they have any sort of triggers for their traumatic event, they will have, oftentimes have panic type symptoms. Okay. Another, I forgot to throw this part in. When we experience a major stressor, we have three different stages of how we respond. Our first one is kind of alarm reaction. And it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Like if you found out that maybe someone in your family is diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, I mean, your first response might be like shock and panic and like worry and intense emotional reactions. But then you would go to the resistance stage, which would be like, okay, I need to make sure that I can get home every weekend. I need to make sure that I can call and make sure everyone's okay. And you would do that. But if that illness went on and on and on for a period of months, you would eventually reach the last stage of adaptation, which is exhaustion. And odds are you would likely get sick from that, because having ongoing stressors that do not diminish usually leads to a state of exhaustion and often susceptibility to illness, because you have cortisol being released in your system, which is a hormone which basically tells the immune system to not function as effectively. Actually, along those lines, if you look at research, people who have experienced long-term stressors over a period of time, those who have long-term stressors are much more susceptible to colds and the flu. They actually show up to the doctor's office a lot more frequently, and they just get physically ill a lot more in comparison to those who don't have those kind of stressors. I was going to just mention I had two other types of stressors back here. Life changes, those are major life changes like starting school, moving, things like that. Those are stressful, even if they're good. Like getting married is often a positive thing, but it's a major life change, and it brings along a body response to it. Also, having a child, anything big change. Then there's a smaller stressors that we have, which are daily hassles, like having to wait in line for things, just losing things, dealing with stupid things like financial aid and stuff like that. Those are daily hassles that also can, if enough of them accumulate, can have an effect on our body too. Let me go back. Two major ways of coping. One is emotion focused, the other is problem focused. And you can probably guess which one's better. Problem focused is that's when, okay, I got to do something about this. During the coronavirus, a lot of people have lost their jobs. I've known several. And so a problem-focused coping would be like, wow, I need to get on LinkedIn. I need to redo my resume. I need to reach out to everybody I know. I need to see, well, maybe do I need another certificate or a degree? Maybe that'll help me get a job. Trying to figure out ways to cope with the problem. That's obviously better. Emotion focused, not so much. I mean, if a person loses their job and all they do is drink or smoke weed, that might make a person temporarily feel better, but that doesn't do anything to solve the problem. Now, the problem is, though, that there are some things that we can have no control over. Like when somebody dies, you can't problem focus your way out of that. And so having time to focus on the emotion and talk about it can actually do a lot to relieve stress and help a person feel better. Actually, even in terms of journaling and writing, as a therapist, I encourage clients to journal frequently. Actually, there's a researcher by the name of Pennebaker. He's talked about in your chapter 3, where you had people who live through trauma just do 4 periods of writing for like 20 minutes about the traumatic event they lived through. And just doing that 4 times, he followed these people up. In comparison to people who experienced trauma and did not journal, the people who wrote about it 4 times went to student health a lot less frequently than the people who didn't have the opportunity to journal about it. Which is saying a lot, just getting it out. Also, at the end of journaling about it, you can see a progression in the writing. The earlier writings would be all about, I had this, I did this, I did, and then the later writings would be like, well, we did this, and then this happened, and including other people in the picture changes one's perspective on a traumatic event. Factors affecting our coping strategies or coping ability. We have, one is predictability and control. These are the 2 major factors. If you can predict something's coming your way and you have some sort of influence or control over it, that does a lot to manage your stress or can help you cope. And that is power. If you can't predict things at all and then everything's always unpredictable, you're going to be really stressed. And but even if you can predict it, that's going to help to some degree. If you can then do something to help minimize its impact on you with your control, that's also going to help. Social support, I have some slides about some of this, but I'm not going to talk too much about all this stuff. People who have good network of friends and family, people to reach out to, they can talk to, lean on, sometimes even for distraction, sometimes just to have an ear to listen to you. People who have social support, they commit suicide less frequently, they have less depression, and they recover from things a lot faster. Self-efficacy is our belief in our ability to do something. So if we have good self-efficacy, we're going to feel like, okay, I may be facing a lot of stressors, but I can do something about it. So our belief in our ability to cope is something else. It's kind of related to optimism, which is generally a more positive view of others and do you see others as more suspiciously, like they're out to get you? Or do you see like, no, things generally work out for the better and I'm hoping for the best and I'm going to see the best in other people? That's optimistic. People who have more optimism also have fewer illnesses and just cope with stressors a lot better. Actually, people who have more social support just live longer. Self-efficacy, I mentioned, you can get this belief in your ability to do something by having done something similar in the past. By watching someone else, you know that, or you could be like your brother or sister. It's like, wait, they graduated from college. I think I can do it too. And then sometimes having just persuasion from others, a teacher, or a mom or dad or coach or somebody says, I know you can do this. I know you can do this. I know you can do this. That's another source of getting a belief in our ability to do certain things. Okay, I'm going to skip over that one. Resilience is something that happens for all of us. So we kind of have a baseline of just life satisfaction, and it's strange. I mean, we can have really bad things happen and really good things happen, but typically over time, what happens is we return to the original level of life satisfaction we had before that event occurred. So even losing someone in your family, I mean, that's really hard. And for a period of years or months, it may be lower, but it typically returns back to where our life satisfaction was before. But also same with good things. I mean, there's research to show that people win the lottery. Initially, they're like, well, this is great. And then after time, they return back to the same level of satisfaction they had with life. And that is the end of actually that went 20 minutes. Didn't mean for that to go quite so long. But hopefully this has helped you have an idea about what to pay attention to in chapter 3. I'm trying to think if there's a couple other things you might want to look at is the research on hardiness discussed in your chapter, and also the study that Walter Mischel did in self-regulation and delay of gratification, the marshmallow study. Some of you, Dr. Homan, have heard of that one before. And that should help you get ready for the upcoming test. I hope this has been helpful.